And it would seem then, of course, that it's an act of God, that this is true, that you belong where white people have put you. It is only since the Second World War that there's been a counter-image in the world. And that image not come about through any legislation on the part of any American government, but through the fact that Africa was suddenly on the stage of the world, and Africans had to be dealt with in a way they'd never been dealt with before. This gave an American Negro for the first time a sense of himself beyond a savage or a clown. It has created, and will create, a great many conundrums. One of the great things that the white world does not know, but I think I do know, is that black people are just like everybody else. One has used the myth of Negro and the myth of color to pretend and to assume that you are dealing essentially with something exotic, bizarre, and practically, according to human laws, unknown.
Note to myself 6 months ago, queer brown love is a magic rainbow fuck unicorn worth waiting for. One day real soon, baby girl, you're gonna have a lover who, when he takes you home on your third date to his house in Elmhurst, Queens, you're gonna notice that he has coconut, castor, argan oil, and shea butter on the dresser. Plus, a big thing of mixed chicks leave-in, the 64-ounce beauty supply special. He's gonna say, baby, do you want me to rub coconut oil on your ass? You're gonna think back to your last white lover, who always said, your hair's so crazy when you wake up. You're gonna think, that's never gonna happen again. You're gonna think, this is justice. You're gonna say, yeah, baby, yes.
Life, all this expectation on a girl child to be an emotional backbone for a family. There are repressive social forces that don't allow for, certain relationships to take hold or people to express themselves in their sexuality. To me, that's the work I always want to do, is when you give me this much room to kind of live, how am I going to break out of that? And how am I going to break things in the process of doing that? When you are living in this world as a woman of color, there's so much expected of you. You have to be 1,000 times better than like someone who comes from a background of privilege to just prove that you're smart and capable and a good person even. You really write in this tunnel that's dark and you don't know where it's going. You don't know if anyone will ever read it. It's okay to cry, it's okay not to work, it's okay to have a bad day. And it's okay to give yourself time. For the writer, the freedom that you have with your words is something that is inviolable. No one can take that from you.
I want my protagonists to be severely flawed, because if they're already good at the beginning, then they have nowhere to grow. So they have to have a flaw so that they can overcome the flaw and become that better person over the course of a book. And my heroine, Min, is very flawed. She too is a liar. She lies to get her way out of trouble. And as I also discovered in middle school, this is maybe not the best life choice.
And Kieran, the protagonist in the novel, I think a similar thing happens where having to deny who he is and having to hide actually leads him to make some kind of terrible decisions that I think hurt a lot of people around him. And that was also something I identified with. I mean, there's a real sort of like protecting of oneself, I think, that happens when you're hiding in that way. And especially a place like West Virginia, where race is very much defined as a binary, black or white, there's really no place for brown. And, so in a lot of ways, I grew up thinking I was white. And it's something that I realized much later. Immigrants, but I think a lot of immigrants during that period in the 80s and 90s, I mean, this was before these sort of like hybrid, hyphenated identities, where there just wasn't space for that kind of complexity. And I think that my parents, and I think a lot of the immigrant parents of that generation, they really wanted their children to assimilate.
I grew up in Bishopbriggs in Glasgow with my mum and dad that were my adoptive parents. There weren't any other kids my colour, so there was just really me and my brother. You did often feel surprised when you looked in the mirror. You felt surprised at your own face, and it wasn't so much that other people treated you as a a stranger or called you names, which they did sometimes, but it was more that you were a stranger to yourself. And I found that quite an interesting thing as a kid, being startled or surprised by my own face, because it wasn't like the face of my friends. And it wasn't like the face of my family. It wasn't like my mum or my dad's face. My whole identity felt like it was shifting and changing as I became a teenager, around about the age of 16, when I became aware that I was a lesbian, and also I became aware of being black in a more conscious way. I remember feeling a sense of being followed, which I've since met other gay people that around that time, before people were openly gay and before it was easy to be out, that you had a sense of almost being watched, a sense of feeling liberated, but also a sense of fear and deep unease. And so I remember feeling both of those things. I felt, I wonder who can see me. It was a strange feeling of being watched. The act of writing was a wonderful thing because it made me feel like inside my own imagination I was really quite strong. We often write because we have a secret self, if you like. We have another self that is not being articulated, and we often write to find a voice for that silent self. That's what writers do.
People told me don't do that. Lesbians don't want to be connected to vampires. Black people don't want to be connected to vampires. And I just did it anyway because I knew there was an underlying story, moral. It was an adventure, but it's all about creating family. It's all about how we create family. Mm-hmm. It's all about what do we do when we come into the world totally powerless, and then suddenly you have power, because it's the outsider. It's the outsider, and one of the reasons I enjoy writing Gilda Stories is because it's an outsider who finds her way to community. So she may remain outside the mainstream, but she's not alone and isolated and, going to kill herself. Right. So it's fun. Writing about vampires is fun.
I live in a town. I live in a town. I live in a town where pretense and bone structure prevail as credentials of status and beauty. A town bewitched by mirrors, horoscopes, and corruption. I intrude on this nightmare, arm outstretched from curbside. I'm not pointing to Zimbabwe. I want a cab, damn, I want a cab, damn, I want a cab to take me to Southeast so I can visit my mother. I'm not ashamed to cross the bridge that takes me there. No matter where I live or what I wear, the cabs speed by or they suddenly break a few feet away, spewing things in my face to serve a fair-skinned fare, a fair-skinned fare. I live in a town where everyone is afraid of the dark. I stand my ground unarmed, facing a mounting disrespect, a diminishing patience, a need for defense. In passing headlights, I appear to be a criminal. I'm a weird-looking motherfucker. Shaggy green hair sprouts all over me. My shoulders hunch and bulge. I growl as blood drips from my glinting fangs. My mother's flowers are wilting while I wait. Our dinner is cold by now. I live in a town where pretense and structure are devices of cruelty. A town bewitched by mirrors, horoscopes, and blood.
I must say, women and black poets who are writing are, as far as I'm concerned, much more satisfying in terms of sharing experience and evocative language.
Marge, do you read other people's poems?
I do. What do you mean by upsetting? I want to know that.
Well, upsetting only really because so much of what is called poetry, or is labeled poetry today, I find the most charitable word that I can use is obstructionist. I think that so much of what is called poetry becomes constructs that are erected in the same way so many of our buildings and other artifacts are, to separate us rather than to make bridges or to pull us together.
Buildings that nobody lives in.
Buildings that nobody lives in, buildings that no one enjoys looking at, buildings that serve no other function except separation.
Or display of power and money.
And to have poetry used, to have those things that function in that way, called poetry, always upsets me.
You read other people's poetry?
Yes.
Have you always?
I write poetry in part because I like it, because I need it. I mean, a lot of poetry is offensive to me, but I think that there's more poetry that is not oppressive than most other parts, of the culture. More than other kinds of books, more than film, certainly, more than records, certainly. There's more poetry that comes out of parts of the culture that feed me, that's written by women, that's written by people coming to consciousness, that's written by blacks, that's written by people who are becoming aware of themselves, who are interested in changing, whose consciousness is not oppressive to me, but feeds me, enlightens me, educates me.
The human race concerns me, and everything that implies, which is the most ambitious thing you can say, and at the same time the most modest too, because I can't think of anything that people do where conflict is born that isn't dramatically interesting. And of course it's the role of the dramatist to select which part is most interesting. I'm particularly attracted to a medium where not only do you get to do what we do in life every day, talk to people, but to be very selective about the nature of the conversation. It's an opportunity to treat character in the most absolute relief, one against the other, so that everything, sympathy and conflict, is played so sharply, even a little more than a novel. And I suppose it's my own private sense of drama that makes that appeal to me.
A desire to talk to people?
A desire to talk to people and to, I suppose, also have them do what you want them to do, ultimately.
Your character.
Yes.
Anywhere. I found my own voice through writing poetry, especially as a teenager. I found it was the way I could talk about a lot of things that you couldn't necessarily, or I didn't feel I could talk to my family about or my friends about at that time. So things like coming to terms with my racial identity, being mixed race and trying to figure out what it meant to be half Greek Cypriot and half Jamaican, coming to terms with my sexuality, kind of figuring out that actually I liked other guys and what that meant for me as a Christian. So there was a lot of things I had to figure out in my poetry, also not having my dad around, coming from a single parent family and trying to figure out who my male role models were in life. A lot of that came out through my poetry, and that was my voice.
I know that the floor is cold, that there are 3 coiled hairs in the sink, a streak of toothpaste where my brother spits and never washes it out. And I know the toilet seat is cracked and that Uncle D has been promising to fix it for the past 3 years. I know what it's like to come in here when it's dark outside and turn the taps and feel the whole house warming up, the gradual breath the house takes through the wallpaper, the carpet, the timber, the kettle, the Dutch pot, the kippers sparking in oil, the television, the toaster, the paraffin heater, when it could be evening or morning, waking or sleeping. I have crept down through indisputable dark and listened to the house open one red eye and spin it round to see me creeping, then snort, then fall back to sleep. I have held this house in my arms and let it sob on the bathroom floor. I have listened to its hushed tones on the telephone, heard it speak a kind of love I hope one day to attain.
ஸோ அப்படி இருக்கிற பட்சத்தில் நான் 10வது படிக்கும்போது தான் எனக்குள்ள செக்ஷுவல் அட்ராக்ஷன், லவ் இதெல்லாம் எனக்கு ஸ்டார்ட் ஆச்சு. அப்போ மகேஷ்ன்ற என்னுடைய கிளாஸ்மேட்டு அவன் என்னை வந்து கிண்டல் பண்ண மாட்டான், அதனால அவன் மேலே எனக்கு லவ் வந்துச்சு. அப்போ தான் முதல் முறையாக நான் எழுத ஆரம்பித்தது, நான் கவிதை எழுத ஆரம்பித்தேன் நான். ஆனால் அந்த பையன்கிட்ட அந்த கவிதை நான் வந்து தரல, அதை நானே வாச்சிட்டு நானே வந்து கிழிச்சு போட்டுட்டேன். ஏன்னா நானும் ஒரு பையனாக இருக்கிறேன், இன்னொரு பையனுக்கு எப்படி லவ் லெட்டர் கொடுக்க முடியும், இது இந்த சமூகம் ஏற்றுக்குமா, இது நம்ம கலாச்சாரத்துக்கு ஒத்து வருமா அப்படின்றது தான் என்னுடைய மனசில் இருந்துச்சு. இந்த பாலியல் வெக்கை, பெண்ணாக வந்து உடை அணிஞ்சுக்கணும், இதனுடைய வெக்கை, இது எல்லாமே என்னை வந்துட்டு எங்கே எனக்கு வந்து சுதந்திரம் கிடைக்கும் அதை நாடி போகணுன்ற ஒரு முடிவுக்கு வந்துட்டு நான். அப்போ தான் என்னுடைய சமுதாயத்துக்குள்ளே நான் வந்து இணைஞ்சேன்.
Redefining Realness is my story of growing up as a trans girl in Honolulu, Hawaii, and also in Oakland, California, and in Dallas, Texas, and coming of age within the context of this family that was struggling, right? I had parents who loved me dearly, but were super ill-equipped. And what does it mean to grow up and discover yourself when you don't have many resources? And where does that lead you? And these are the questions and the things I hope to shed light on within my book.
Deep out, people are starting to realize that there is something deeper within ourselves, and there's a higher calling that we answer to. And so, yeah, I think we'll continue to see, more and more people come out and openly discuss, what they inherently feel inside as individuals. Discussion begins around the dinner table, and even with, myself and being around families and friends that were acting out against, homosexuality or gay or lesbian, and talking down against, people that relate to this. And what happens is around the dinner table, as a kid myself, you become very uncomfortable about sharing the feeling that you have inside or what you inherently feel as a person. So then you create this false life that allows you to stay close with your friends and close with your family and accepted by your family, because let's face it, everyone wants to be accepted. So yeah, as a result of that, then you get into what the down low and secret sexual relationships and the not using proper protection and so forth. And yes, so it just exacerbates the HIV situation even more so.
My desire was to make it relentless and to have it return. Often sex, gay or otherwise, is seen as a plot point. You build these characters towards it, and then there's almost a tension that's relieved, and then you move on. Maybe you get married, or what have you, or you graduate, school. But it felt more faithful to me to return to it, that it's not a threshold. Because for queer bodies, we never got the conversation about the birds and the bees. We have to fail into pleasure. And that failure builds upon itself towards self-knowledge, that every time you fail, you learn something about yourself, and to find and harvest pleasure from one another. And so I wanted that internal crisis and that drama to be opened, and for the desire to be felt as weather in the book. And so sex returns again and again, not as something that they get over with, but something that they use to discover and learn about each other.
Back to a point about the dual prejudice. So when I, as a black man, this is the thing, they can tell you're black from 100 yards away. If you, as a gay person, you make that revelation, you can make that revelation in a place that suddenly becomes very hostile very quickly. And that can be your own community, it can be your own household. And certainly I experienced, really quite troubling levels of homophobia in my sort of immediate environment. And as we know, like my parents are Ugandan, well, we don't know that, but you know that now. So, and as we know in Uganda, they're currently driving through the anti-gay bill at the moment. They're trying to. And in terms of the dual prejudice, it's funny because it manifests in weird ways, because black men are objectified in the gay world. There's no question about that. Sexually, we're objectified. And things are expected of us sexually that they wouldn't expect necessarily other races. I know this because I'm not going to go into detail. It's a family show. But also, like, you notice the prejudice in the football world as well, because I write about sport, and there aren't many out, footballers. There aren't many out journalists. There aren't many out, if you get outside the entertainment industries, how many out football writers are there? There's 2 of us. You can count them. So there's still a massive journey to go in, and I think actually, as time goes on, I probably experience more prejudice, I think, maybe on the homophobic side than the race side, which surprises me, I think.
To the transphobic cis white gay men at Pride. Yes, this rainbow flag is just what I needed to redeclare my colorful flamboyance that you swallowed to the back of your throat, to plant another flag that forgets the death toll of black and brown queers. I can see why this is your favorite holiday. The time you get to step outside of your picket fence body, remind yourself that you were once oppressed, use your Donald Trump key card to swipe into your marginalized experience, Get to shake your ass to the disappointed trans woman that you left somewhere over the rainbow. It ain't like a gay white man to remember all the colors but black. To turn my protest into a white soldier shootout. To bleach his asshole mouth clean of the shit he says. Did you think I would forget? That you thought Willie Ninja couldn't duck walk all over Madonna? How you queened a white mother when she couldn't even step foot inside the house? Couldn't survive the shade the children threw with their hands. White is always trying to imitate color. Did you see how Hannah Montana made her post-race return? How Miley figured out what's good, figured out the white made of all colors was a white lie. Roy G. Biv sounds like a black made concept to me. Because what does whiteness know about color when black absorbs all of its problems? Gay rights mean nothing without a trans woman of color behind it.
When the responders came to the nightclub in Orlando, they announced, if you're still alive, raise your hand. And meanwhile, I was asleep in a bed I never thought I would have. People like us are used to lonely, are used to sobs so hard that homes are like unfathomable dreams. We search for the rescue of safety in our own skin and reasons to just hold someone's hand, to just find a job that doesn't call us by the wrong name, to just find ourselves lost in the music. Earlier that night, people didn't get to leave the dance floor. What is the beat of bullets when we are too used to percussion already? Cusses and threats beat the seams of our skin. Of course, salvation is to tut and tick our own terms, and tears are but dance sweat. So as the gunshots from the balcony seared the air, there were boys holding hands with other boys for the first time, which then became their last time. And there were others trying to forget a hard day to the lilt of limbs at the lip of a bottle with brand new shade of lipstick. And there were strobe lights that could have been falling stars, but instead, they were bodies.
No, I see myself as a human being. I don't even see myself as an activist, really. I think we should all be activists. It's our duty to be active in our community. I think when somebody calls me an activist, I think it just means that they're not. My life. I think it's important that poets and singers don't just sing about freedom, sing about justice, that we actually get up and go out there and campaign for it and stand up and be counted. It's also important, you know, you have this written tradition and the oral tradition, but the oral tradition I think is much more direct. The audience is in front of me, they connect with the poem immediately. It's very democratic. I've been doing a gig and someone's got up and said, I've got a poem like that, and I said, come up and do it then. You know, and they just got up and done it with me. So I like the directness of it, and even when governments and dictators start banning and burning books, you know, we can still speak poetry to each other.
This one I do a lot in schools because I passionately believe in, you know, this interaction between the spoken word and the written word, you know, the word on the page and the word on the stage. So this one goes out for you tonight, and it's called Word. Give me a word, any word. Let it roll across the tongue like a dolly mixture. Open your lips. Say it loud. Let each syllable vibrate like a transistor. Say it again, 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 till it's a tongue twister. Till its meaning is in tatters. Till its meaning equals sound. Now write it down.
A few years back, and they told me black means a hole where other folks got brain. It was like the cells in the heads of black children was out to every hour on the hour naps. Scientists call the phenomenon the notorious Jensen lapse, remember? Anyway, I was thinking about how to devise a test for the wise, like a Stanford Binet for the CIA, you know? Take Einstein being the most, the unquestionable, the outstanding, the maximal mind of the century, right? And I'm struggling against this lapse left over from my black childhood to fathom why anybody should say so.
Well, you talk about stereotypes, labels, and identity. Do you think that these are unusual against the integration?
I think
I think identity and the way that we identify with ourselves can make it more difficult to integrate. But I would also question, what is the society, what is the dominant society that we are trying to integrate into? What sort of values does it have, and why is it making it difficult for people to integrate? So I think we should question it both ways. But I think as well, in all of us, we have a lot of different identities. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm Arab, I'm gay, and so I feel often that I relate to the identity that is most under attack in the society that I'm living in. And so I think there needs to be also more room to accept these different identities within us in some way.
Thank you, Saka. Do you know what pisses me off? Long paper receipts for just one item. Luxury scented toilet paper. Assuming the whole world has internet access. Digital radio. Exclusion by myopia. Being silenced, being hyphenated, minority, other, being exotic. Only being booked during Black History Month. Only being booked during International Women's Month. The assumption of heterosexuality. The smug assumption that as I'm black, I'm more homophobic. Libraries full of books that don't reflect my reality.
All the money spent on visa gone. Them not even give her back the flight money. The Heathrow Airport poem was inspired by the fact that I was on the train and I was looking across at someone's newspaper. And in that newspaper, on the headings, I could see a plane load of Jamaicans turned back at Heathrow immigration. And I just thought about watching the news and people saying, oh, these people are coming, taking all our jobs. And I wanted to give another view, especially as a Caribbean person whose family have been turned back, who are only coming for holiday. And I just wondered how a whole plane load of people. And so I kind of started to imagine what it would be like, those individuals. And I wanted to do it from the perspective of an individual who was turned back.
After I had been kind of in the circle of writers, poets, activists who were themselves telling their own stories, I began to see that when other people told stories in particular ways, that I could recognize myself in it. And that there was a way that it connected me to them, and I saw how the work connected them to other people. And I began to see it as a kind of communal activity. And I began to see that the work that was most appreciated, the work that resonated most with the most people, was the work that had in it the ability to paint other faces with a brushstroke, even though it, at first glance, looked like a self-portrait. So when I heard the African American talking about being an outsider, and that business of being an outsider was something I recognized for myself in being an outsider as a lesbian in Jamaica. When someone wrote a poem about poverty, and it made me feel like they understood what it meant to be an immigrant in America. And I suppose that at first I wanted to tell the kind of stories that resonated on a lateral level, not just from me to the audience, but from, anyone who would be listening.
But I see it in my life because I've lived long enough now to really see that you just do what you can, and you never know what it's going to become. You write out of your experience, you write out of what you read, you write out of everything. You bring it all to the page. But then the curious thing is that once you bring it all to the page, you basically forget how you got there, and then it seems like it's magic.
Hi all, it's Black History Month here over in the UK, so I just wanted to pull this together as something a bit different and fun. I think I was mainly inspired by Dear White People, where Samantha White creates a film project which is interviewing a lot of her friends, but in this video, it's all people of colour throughout history, both present and past, in terms of the interviews they've done and where people have collected them on YouTube. This is not a definitive list at all. This is just an opportunity to get to know some more writers who are out there, either past or present. Down in the description below there will be some lists to books and also where all the film sources are, which are being listed for you right now. I hope that you get something out of this, and if you managed to stay through to the end, congratulations, well done, and thank you for watching. Anyway, I will see you all again real soon. Okay, take care, bye.